Hello and welcome to today's episode of A Stark Realization, a podcast about educational trends, changes, and inspiration. And today I have one of those guests that is and continues to be an inspiration to me, not only when he was one of my students, but also as he continues to grow and to improve and to make himself into the individual that he wants to be. Today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about some people call it stick-to-itiveness. Other educators might call it grit. Some may refer to it as, as being in the grind, or as my guest today has told me before, it's part of that hustle, about getting after it and doing what you are passionate about. I'm honored to welcome my guest today, Tyree Sweets. How are you, sir?
Good. How you doing, Skinner?
I'm doing great, man. It's a pleasure to have you. I'm excited to be able to visit with you. It's always awesome to be able to catch up with former students, but also to be able to hear and talk about what they're doing in their life and what they believe in and what matters. And that's why I wanted to visit with you today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Appreciate you for having me on.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your art. Tell us about your music. How did this start and what are you doing now with it?
So it started when I was really young. I grew up in a Baptist family, so I was always going to church. My grandma, she played pretty much every instrument at the church, so I was always into music since I was young. She got me started singing, and pretty much from there, I played a little bit of guitar, and just from there I was on and running.
That's awesome. So how the style of music, you really moved from kind of a religious background and then went to, going from gospel music to hip hop and rap. How did that transition come about?
So when I was growing up, my parents mainly, they listened to like a little bit of rock and stuff, but mostly it was all hip hop and R&B. And so I was just kind of gravitated toward that mostly. And then my older brother, he was kind of more into like rock and like alternative type music. So I kind of got a little bit of that in me too. So I have a lot of stuff that I like to pick from.
That's
A lot
cool.
of people would like, if I play music, sometimes a lot of people hear it like, oh, you're listening to that, but it's kind of music. It has its own little personality to it. So
That's cool. So so what got you that you just, when did this happen where you're just like, you know what, I want to make my own music. I want to pursue music. Uh, when did that kind of happen for you? And when you started realizing that this is something that you could pursue and do?
well, probably since I was like 12, I've been writing songs, but I never really seriously like took it serious until probably like 14. All my cousins and stuff, we were all going to the same school, and we all were into music and the culture that, hip hop and everything brings. So it kind of just, we all gravitated towards that. And then as I just got better and started learning more about music and actually learning not just about hip hop, but music in general, the background of music and notes, keys, stuff like that. I just fell in love with it, really.
That's awesome. So how do you go from being in rural Wyoming to then having an opportunity to go and start working on music? You moved down to Atlanta for a while, right? Isn't that how'd that come about?
Really, my dad, he stays out here in Atlanta, and I'm not originally from Wyoming. I'm originally from Dallas, but I moved to Wyoming with my mom when I was 11. So I never really had any intentions on staying in Wyoming, to be honest with you. I was trying to get done with school and get out on and out my way and go out into the world and do different stuff. But I don't know, Atlanta, my dad, like I said, my dad lived out here, and Atlanta has just always had a huge music scene
Yeah,
forever. So I was just like, well, if I'm gonna move somewhere, I have some family out there, so I'll just go out there and see how I like it. And then from there, I came out here and pretty much just fell in love with everything about the South. The
yeah,
whole vibe's different down here.
absolutely. Two of my favorite musicians actually are out of Atlanta. Outkast, who I was listening to all the time when I was younger and still
One of
do.
the GOATs.
And Kyle Lucas. A lot of people may not think of me liking Kyle Lucas, but I love his work. It's great music. Atlanta, you're right, has just incredible music scene. So who are some of the producers and stuff? Who'd you get hooked up with? Who were you working with? And how did you get connected to them to start recording some music?
Really down here, it's kind of like your talent speaks for yourself. So I would go to studios and just work. I'm working on me, you know what I'm saying? I would go to
Mm-hmm.
studios for me and do what I'm doing. And as I just kept going out more and meeting people, everyone, like a lot of people are just like your music's different. Like I like your style. I like how you just carry yourself. And so that's how I kind of got to meet a lot of people. I've met with like a couple big producers out here. So everything's just slow. It's a slow race. Like they said.
That's so good. Well, that brings us to that topic that we have about that stick-to-itiveness or that grit, and and keep going. Um, how do you deal with that? How do you keep on that and that motivation, even when, as you said, sometimes it can be slow. It can even be frustrating, and for many, those moments of where it's just truly disheartening. What keeps you going? How do you keep that drive?
To be honest, a lot of it has to do with just experience and a lot of how I was raised and a lot of stuff I had to go through. Just when you have to go through a lot of stuff in life, like, it kind of teaches you early at a young age that you can't just give up and stop just because stuff gets hard. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so it has a lot to do with that. And at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with just being confident and not caring what other people have to say. Because a lot of the times people will say stuff just to get a reaction. They might not even mean what they're saying. They're just saying it to see how you react to it.
Yeah. That's a good point. So, as you mentioned, you've had to go through a lot of things, and that's brought you to that point. How much of your past experience and those things that have brought you here do you rely on when it comes to your writing and putting into your music?
Really, almost all of it. I mean, when you're writing, it's kind of for an outside person that doesn't really deal with music a lot, it's kind of hard to explain the process. But really, at the end of the day, I just take everything. I mean, good, bad, the ugly, everything. You take all of that and you just use it to your advantage. You like even the good stuff, you can use that to your advantage. Everything, there's always something you could take advantage of in every situation. You just have to find what that is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I do like about your music is, as you mentioned earlier, that people said that your sound is different. It is different, but I like in the writing how it's not like all of your songs are on a similar topic. I love how you'll have that one song that that is a little more deep and has that heart to it, and the next song's more upbeat and lively, and it brings that happy stuff out. And so I
Definitely.
enjoy that you have um, that eclectic nature, that you're looking at the whole and being able to write about that. I think that's fantastic. So you did also mention that sometimes people are doubting. How do you deal with whether it's those that are just saying something to see how you react, or those that are quote unquote haters? How do you deal with those people that are the naysayers that may even when you were saying, hey, I'm going to Atlanta, I'm gonna go start making music, and I know you probably had people like, dude, you can't do this, it's not gonna
Oh yeah,
happen.
I heard more of I don't think you should go down there more than I've. To be honest, I maybe had 3 or 4 people tell me like, I know you can do this, so just get out there and do what you got to do. But really, the thing is, it's easy. It's easier when it's someone that you don't know personally or you don't have a relationship with. It's easier to just like, okay, whatever, I don't care what you say. But
Hmm.
it comes to a point where it's like the people that you do have a relationship with, even sometimes then, like, they don't see the vision, which is like, it's unfortunate. But the way I see it is that if you don't see the vision how I see the vision, then I don't need you around, really. Which is I mean, and it's a hard thing to do, but it's like, if you can't get with the program, then I don't need you around the program.
That's great. There's another. He's a principal that I visit with, and he's just awesome. His name's Hamish Brewer, and he has a similar premise to that. He's basically, if you got those people that are like that anchor that's dragging behind that boat, and they're just weighing you down, cut them loose and just let them go, and you go do your thing. I think that's great.
And
It's tough, but yeah.
it is. It's one of the hardest things to do. Like, and getting a little personal, like it's a little bit easier for me because I've had to separate myself from very close family members. You know what I'm saying? Just because I don't like what's happening, or I don't, I don't like how situations are going, and it's like it's sad. At the end of the day, it's sad that it has to happen, but you have to live your life for you. You know what I'm saying? You can't live your life for other people, because when you do that, you're gonna look in 20 years, you're gonna look back and just be like, dang, I was really just living my whole life for other people instead of living it for yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a great point. So as you talk about your experiences, I know you put that into your music. Before we get into our next topic, though, how can people listen to you? If you got people that want to get your music, if they want to follow you on social media and stuff, how do they go about finding you online so they can get more familiar with your work?
Yeah. I'm on all my social medias. It's 90s Baby Reese it's on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, everything. On YouTube, it's 90s Baby Reese, and then Apple Music, Spotify, SoundCloud, all of that. It's all 90s Baby Reese, so it's relatively easy to find.
Awesome. And we'll have those all in the links in the description below, so make sure you guys check those out.
Definitely
Go
check
and
that out if you
follow
want to
them.
hear some new good music.
That's right. Listen to them and share it and talk about it, because that's what I mean. A lot of artists, the up and comers, that's where they're starting. They need people listening and understanding their work and why they're passionate about it. So get out there and do that. That mean a lot to both of us. So please do it.
Exactly. Appreciate it.
Of course, man. So our next topic, this one, we're going to get a little bit heavier into stuff that kind of made you uh, who you are and why you're passionate about what you do. As you mentioned that you grew up down in Dallas and then you moved to Wyoming, and being in Wyoming, we simply don't have a lot of students of color. That's just simply a fact in the demographic of Wyoming. I had one of my African American students. He said to me one day, he asked me, he goes, "Mr. Skinner, do you think you're racist?" I said, "Well, of course I'm not racist." And he said, "But how do you know if you haven't had time to practice not being racist?" And that actually threw me back for a minute. I was like, like no one's ever questioned me. He goes, "I believe you. I believe you're a great person. I believe you're a kind, caring individual." He goes, "But if I'm the only student of color that you have, and you haven't really had time to practice showing that compassion, showing understanding, listening to a student of color, how do you really know that you're any good at it or not biased towards me?" And that just floored me.
Yeah, that was a student that asked you that?
Yeah.
That's
And
a great question, to be
and
honest.
so that brings me to that question then. Being and growing up in an area where you don't have a lot of students of color, and that puts you in a situation that that hopefully no one ever should feel that they're excluded or viewed differently. But again, we have inherent biases sometimes that we don't even know exist. How did being in a school climate like that, how did that affect you in your learning and your development and your understanding and learning from your educators, or any possible problems that may have arose because of simply that lack of practice?
Um, this is gonna sound really ironic, but um, Wyoming is it's not it's not as racist. Like, there is racism, but it's not as blatant. Like, when if I'm in Dallas or Atlanta, like, it's almost, especially when I was younger and going to like a school environment, it was almost like it was segregated though. Like, it was like extremely racist. Whereas in Wyoming, it's like it's more of like everyone keeps it under the covers, and they'll say stuff behind your back, and it's kind of just petty racism. It's not the blatant racism that most people would expect to hear or see from Wyoming. But dealing with it, I mean, at the end of the day, that just comes down to having tough skin. I mean, because you really can't do anything about it at the end of the day. You can't, I mean, if you get physical with somebody, you know how that ends up. That doesn't never turn out good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm living proof for that. That never turns out how it should turn out. But it's just like, it takes maturity. As you mature and grow older, you'll kind of understand it more. Like when I was young, I mean, anytime someone said anything that was even remotely racist to me, I was ready to just act on it. So
Yeah. So what advice would you have for educators? I've turned to you a couple times. That student, the one that asked me that question, he's the one that I talked to you a year or so ago when he passed away,
yeah.
and that impacted me pretty heavily, and it really made me question, some of those things about some of those possible biases that I didn't know existed, and how to get past those, how to deal with those. And so if you had some suggestions and advice for educators, regardless of where they are in the country, who may simply not have had a classroom environment that does have students of color, and they get to learn, and they get to have that opportunity to educate amazing youth that may be different from themselves, what are those words of advice? How do you tell a teacher, from that student point of view, what do they need to do? What do they need to do differently or to do better?
Really, the main thing that people can do is just be more understanding, and try to learn more, instead of just judging a book by its cover. You know what I'm saying? Because really, I mean, from a teacher or educator standpoint, it's kind of hard to especially in Wyoming. This is the thing. It's kind of hard because you don't want it to come off as like you're trying to cater to people of color, but you don't want to come off either you're trying to cater to non-people of color. So it's kind of from an educator standpoint, it's really tough. I would hate to have that job, to be honest.
Well, I certainly appreciate the conversations that you and I had, that we continue to have. It's really helped me improve as an educator, and it's also helped me understand that listening, that understanding that I can't. Yeah, I can empathize. I can do that. I can try to empathize and try to value and to care, but at the same time, I can't understand exactly what that student's going through. I can't understand those situations or those biases or those times where some of that blatant or subtle racism exists. I can't understand that, but I can always empathize and try to listen and care as much as I
See,
can.
and that's the key. That is the key right there. You in life, you won't always be able to understand a situation that you're not in yourself. You know what I'm saying? So the most you can do is be empathetic to the situation and try as hard as you possibly can to understand.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Tyree, always a pleasure, man. It's awesome to talk to you again. So I just need to ask one more favor of you before we go. And
Yeah, no
that's
problem.
when you are at an award show, when you are in the future, when you are performing on some big stage or something, just make sure you send me an invite, okay?
No problem. No problem. And I want to say one more thing to every student that has ever had the chance to meet you. I know you've changed so many lives, and mine personally. To be honest with you, I don't know if I would have been able to finish my last year of school if you weren't there, because there was a lot of people, and teachers, staff included, that didn't want me around. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate everything you ever did for me, man. I really do.
I appreciate that. That means a lot, man. Love you.
Love you too, man.
All right, you take care.
You
And
too.
thanks for all of our listeners tuning in and joining us today on A Stark Realization. And remember, can't always choose what life brings into you, but you can always choose what you bring to life. So keep changing lives, keep sharing those dreams, and go and listen to some of Tyree's music. You're gonna love it.
Thank you guys very much.